In the last decade or so, we've begun to get a lot of information, a lot of ways to try to retrieve the sensory abilities of dinosaurs, which is sort of phenomenal to think about. There's creatures long dead, but we can try to reconstruct their senses. And that's because a lot of the organs associated with senses have to do with the brain or other structures that are encased in bone. So those soft tissues are long gone, but the spaces in which those organs occupy, we can still find those spaces, especially with CT scanning. So there's a couple different ways we can reconstruct their senses. One is vision. We know where the eyeball goes. We can get a good sense of the size of the eyeball that would fit in there. And this is based on work of Kent Stevens and colleagues. We can look at how the eyeballs are oriented in different groups of meat-eating dinosaurs. So here is a typical large-bodied meat-eater, Acanthosaurus, an all-American dinosaur. It's been found in the West, it's been found in Texas, it's been found in Oklahoma, it's been found in Maryland, all over America. And its eyes are mostly facing to the side, as opposed to Tyrannosaurus rex and its relatives, where the eyes have a lot of overlap in front. So Tyrannosaurus rex is something that could really stare you right down, and you would probably not want that to be happening. In fact, actually, let me just back up here. The reason that's so impressive is that in order to have good depth perception, you need both eyes to be able to focus on the same object. And so things like Allosaurus and Acanthosaurus and Carcharodontosaurus and Giganotosaurus and Spinosaurus and company had a very small range in which both eyes could focus on the same object. But Tyrannosaurs had a much wider range. Not as wide as us. I mean, our range of depth perception goes out to something like this. Tyrannosaurs are something like this. Allosaurs something more like that. Very little overlap. And if these guys are up against animals like Triceratops and the other big horned dinosaurs, the ability to maneuver around these relatively fast-moving, heavily armed prey items and avoid those big horns is probably really good selective pressure to have good binocular vision. We can also reconstruct how Tyrannosaurus smelled, or how its sense of smell was. And what do they smell like? They probably smell really gross. Eating lots and lots and lots of dead things. And live things, and yeah. Anyway, but we can reconstruct their sense of smell because the part of the brain associated with smell is one of the easier things to pick out from these CT scans of the brain. So here's the skull of a Tyrannosaurus, and in blue, that's the brain. So not a whole lot of the skull is occupied by the brain. Although to be fair, Tyrannosaurus actually has, for a dinosaur, a proportionally pretty big brain. Now that's damned by faint praise, given that most people, one of the things you know about dinosaurs, they typically have small brains. So the olfactory bulbs here are the part associated with the processing of the sense of smell. And some colleagues of mine have plotted out the relative size of those olfactory bulbs versus the body size of the animal. And here it's plotted out. These middle line, those are the typical meat-eating dinosaurs. These points down here are the plant-eating, meat-eating dinosaurs. This cluster over here, that's the Tyrannosaurs. And the cluster over here are the Dromaeosaur raptors, Velociraptor, Deinonychus, Dromaeosaurus, creatures like that. And so these two groups of sort of hunters par excellence among the dinosaurs have disproportionately large olfactory bulbs, and by inferring that, a disproportionately better sense of smell than your typical meat-eaters, and especially better than these plant-eating meat-eating dinosaurs that probably didn't have to hunt by sense of smell, because plants typically don't get up and move, you don't have to track them. Speaking of moving, what can we say about the running ability of T-Rex and other Tyrannosaurs? Now, ideally, we would have nice trackways, because if you've got a nice long trackway of football after football after football, you can actually do a couple calculations and work out how fast that animal was going at the time it made its tracks. Now, it's not going to be its maximum speed, because the environments that preserve these tracks are normally muddy, slippery environments, and not many animals are going to run at top speed in those. But at least it's something. The problem is we don't have any Tyrannosaurus trackways. We have a couple Tyrannosaurus tracks, individual footprints, but not track ways, footprint after footprint. So we can't use that. But can we try to figure out something about locomotion? We can, because we have all the apparatus that we use to move, at least the bony part of it. We have the skeleton. And so we can look at the hind limb anatomy, the skeletal anatomy of Tyrannosaurs, and compare them to other types of dinosaurs. So we won't be able to throw a number on these in terms of speeds in miles per hour or meters per second or whatever, but we can get a sense of relative speed. So Tyrannosaurs, like Tarbosaurs here, typically have longer lower parts of the feet than do other meat-eating dinosaurs. Now, why is this lower part of the foot important? Well, let's just orient ourselves. That's up here, that's the hip, that's the knee, that's the ankle. But dinosaurs didn't walk like us. Dinosaurs always walked on the balls of their feet. All dinosaurs, all the time. Even the big heavy ones did that. They just got a big pad of fat to help cushion it. They got, sort of, I guess, wedges. All dinosaurs are walking up on the top of the feet. So those long bones of the foot are part of that whole sequence of moving forward. Well, if you have a longer leg and you're covering this, and you're swinging your leg out at the same rate, you're covering more distance per time, which in and of itself is an adaptation for speed. And like I like to point out, you can take a hog and a pony of the same body mass. The torsos are about the same size, but those longer legs of the pony give it a much longer stride, and therefore it can be a much faster animal. But there's more than that, because if you look at the feet of Tyrannosaurs compared to their cousins, the other groups of meat-eating dinosaurs, Tyrannosaurs have this very narrow foot with this wedge shape in the middle. It's a shock absorber in the middle to help absorb the energy of impact and release it again to give them an extra spring in their step that we don't see in typical meat-eating dinosaurs like Allosaurus or the Spinosaurs or so forth. And in fact, if we take a lot of measurements of dinosaurs, and that's one thing we paleontologists do, you see the pictures of us going out in the field and digging stuff up, and that's fun. What we do a lot of times is going into the basement. We go to the great cities of the world and go into the basements of museums and measure stuff. So, but they measure them, they plot them up. This is the length of the foot, essentially. Here's the length of the thigh, the femur. And let's put the different dinosaur groups on here. We find that Tyrannosaurs have these longer feet, demonstrably longer than Allosaurs and Megalosaurs and so forth of the same body size. So they're covering more area per stride. And in fact, small Tyrannosaurs plot right there amongst the ostrich dinosaurs. The ostrich dinosaurs have long been interpreted as the fastest moving of the dinosaurs of the Mesozoic. They have very long, slender feet with this shock-absorbing foot. And yet, small Tyrannosaurs are right there amongst them. So if these guys are the fastest moving dinosaurs, well, a young or small Tyrannosaur is right up there with them. More importantly, how do Tyrannosaurs plot against their prey? So this is the same element, this is the foot compared between Tyrannosaurs and things like the duckbills and the horned dinosaurs and some of the smaller prey in their environment. And Tyrannosaurs were almost certainly faster than all of them, and that's all they needed to be. Tyrannosaurs probably couldn't chase down jeeps. They probably couldn't chase down racehorses like some people suggested. Almost certainly not. But they didn't have to be, because they weren't chasing horses, and except on Jurassic Park, they weren't chasing jeeps. They were chasing duckbills and horned dinosaurs, and that's all you need to be faster than. And among these guys, you don't need to be faster than the Tyrannosaurs. You just need to be faster than the other members of your population.